In the 15th century, in a land trapped between war and betrayal, there was one name that made all of Europe tremble whenever it was spoken. People said he dined beside dying men. People said he built forests made from bodies impaled on wooden stakes. And people also claimed he had died and returned more than once. That man was Vlad Dracula. But the most terrifying part is this. He wasn't a legend, he was real. To understand Vlad Dracula, you first have to understand the nightmare he was born into. The 15th century was not an age of peace. It was an era of war, betrayal, and bloodshed spreading across Europe. And in the middle of that chaos, there was a small land called Wallachia, a principality too weak to defend itself, yet too important for the great empires to ignore. To the south stood the Ottoman Empire, expanding like a storm across Europe. One city after another fell beneath its armies. To the north stood Hungary, determined to stop the Ottoman advance before it pushed deeper into Christian Europe. And trapped between those two powers was Wallachia, a land constantly forced to choose between survival or submission. Every ruler of Wallachia faced the same impossible question: bow to the Ottomans and be branded a traitor to Christianity, or resist them and watch the country be destroyed. But the most terrifying part was this: Wallachia's enemies were not only outside its borders. Inside the country, the nobles known as the boyars were obsessed with power. They betrayed kings, changed sides constantly, assassinated one another, and replaced rulers whenever it benefited them. There were periods when a prince could barely remain on the throne for a few years before being overthrown or murdered. Imagine growing up in a world where loyalty barely existed, a world where even family members could betray each other for power, a world where every meal, every meeting could become your last. That was the world Vlad inherited. And then there was his father, Vlad II Dracula, a member of the Order of the Dragon, an organization created to defend Christian Europe against the Ottoman expansion. The symbol of the order was a dragon, and that symbol followed Vlad's family everywhere. People whispered about it, some admired it, others feared it, because in old Romanian, the word Dracul did not only mean dragon. Over time, it also became associated with something far darker, the devil. And from that, the name Dracula was born, the son of Dracula, the son of the dragon, or the son of the devil. At the time, no one could have imagined that centuries later, this name would become one of the most terrifying symbols in human history. But perhaps the most important thing to understand is this: Vlad Dracula was not born a monster. He was born into a world where cruelty was survival, a world where mercy could get you killed, and a world where fear was sometimes stronger than death itself.
If you grew up in a world where betrayal was normal, where rulers were constantly murdered, and where weakness meant death, do you think you could still become a good person?
In 1442, Vlad's life changed forever. At the age of around 13, he and his younger brother Radu were taken from their home and brought before Sultan Murad II of the Ottoman Empire. Officially, it was part of a diplomatic agreement. In reality, they were hostages. Their father, Vlad II Dracula, had promised loyalty to the Ottoman Empire in exchange for keeping his throne in Wallachia. But promises meant nothing without guarantees. And in the Ottoman world, royal hostages were one of the most effective political weapons ever created. If Vlad's father betrayed the Sultan, his sons would die. Just like that. Imagine the fear. One day, you're a noble child living among your family. And the next, you are dragged into the heart of an empire your people have called the enemy for generations. Everything around Vlad suddenly changed. The language, the religion, the customs, the people, even the air must have felt unfamiliar. The brothers were brought to Edirne, the Ottoman capital at the time, a city far larger and richer than anything Vlad had ever seen. Massive palaces, endless markets, mosques towering over the streets, elite soldiers marching through the city like machines built for war. For a young boy from Wallachia, the Ottoman Empire must have looked unstoppable, and in many ways, it was. But unlike ordinary prisoners, Vlad and Radu were not locked inside dark dungeon cells. The Ottomans educated noble hostages. They were taught Turkish, military strategy, horseback riding, philosophy, mathematics, and court politics. The empire wanted them cultured, useful, loyal, because one day, these boys might return home and rule neighboring kingdoms under Ottoman influence. That was the plan, and slowly, it worked on Radu. Radu adapted quickly. He learned the Ottoman language fluently, he admired their culture, and over time, he became extremely close to Prince Mehmed, the future Sultan Mehmed II, the man who would later conquer Constantinople. Some historians even believe Radu genuinely preferred life within the Ottoman court over returning to Wallachia. But Vlad was different, very different. Where Radu adapted, Vlad resisted. Where Radu found opportunity, Vlad saw humiliation. Historical records describe Vlad as stubborn, intense, and difficult to control. He refused to fully submit to Ottoman authority, and according to some accounts, that resistance came with consequences. Punishment, isolation, harsher treatment. Whether every story is true or exaggerated, one thing is certain. The years spent as a hostage changed Vlad forever, because during those years, he learned two lessons that would define the rest of his life. First, power belongs to those willing to use fear. The Ottoman Empire ruled not only through armies, but through psychological terror, executions, public punishments, displays of absolute authority. Vlad watched all of it, and he never forgot. Second, trust no one, not kings, not allies, not even empires. Because the moment political interests changed, even children could become bargaining chips. And perhaps that is where the transformation truly began. Not in battle, not on the throne, but inside the mind of a frightened boy forced to survive among enemies. A boy who slowly realized that kindness could be weakness, and fear could keep you alive.
Do you think Vlad was already dangerous before becoming a hostage, or did the Ottoman Empire unknowingly create the man the world would later fear as Dracula?
While Vlad and Raju were still being held by the Ottomans, Wallachia began to collapse. Their father, Vlad the Dracula, was trapped between two storms. On one side stood the Ottoman Empire growing stronger every year and demanding absolute loyalty. On the other side stood Hungary, the Christian power that wanted Wallachia to become a shield against the Ottoman advance. But the problem was this: neither side truly trusted Vlad II. To the Ottomans, he seemed too close to the Christian West. To Hungary, he appeared too soft toward the Ottomans. He tried to balance both sides, but in that era, standing in the middle was often the fastest way to be destroyed. And then, in 1447, everything collapsed. John Hunyadi, the powerful Hungarian military leader, launched a campaign against Vlad II Dracula. The Wallachian nobles quickly switched sides. Men who once swore loyalty to Vlad's father suddenly betrayed him. Vlad II Dracula was captured, then killed. Some historical accounts claim he was beheaded. Others suggest he was murdered while trying to flee. But what happened to Vlad's older brother, Mircea II, was even more horrifying. Mircea was captured by Wallachian nobles. According to several chronicles, he was brutally tortured. His eyes were burned blind. Then, he was buried alive while still breathing. No one knows exactly how accurate these stories are. But what matters is this: these were the stories Vlad heard. Imagine that feeling. You are being held hostage in a foreign empire, and suddenly you learn that your father has been murdered, your brother tortured to death, and there is nothing you can do. You cannot return home. You cannot save them. All you can do is swallow your rage. That moment may have destroyed the last piece of Vlad's childhood forever. Because after this tragedy, he no longer saw the world the same way. Vlad realized that power was not built through kindness. It was built through fear. The men who murdered his father were not punished because they were cruel. They succeeded because they made others fear them more. And from that moment on, Vlad began to change. He was no longer the noble boy taken hostage by an empire. He became a man obsessed with betrayal. Many historians believe that nearly all of Vlad's later brutality can be traced back to the events of 1447. Because in his eyes, mercy had killed his father, weakness had destroyed his family, and if he wanted to survive in this world, he would have to become more terrifying than everyone else.
If you lost your family in such a brutal way, do you think you could still believe in human kindness? Or was that the exact moment Vlad decided the only way to avoid betrayal was to make everyone fear him?
After the deaths of his father and brother, Vlad had nothing left to lose. But strangely enough, the Ottomans decided to release him and send him back to Wallachia. At first, it seemed completely irrational. Why would they give power to the son of a man who had once betrayed them? The answer lay in the chaos of Wallachia itself. The Ottomans understood that an unstable land was always easier to control. And Vlad, a young man filled with hatred, ambition, and a desire for revenge, could become the perfect tool. They did not need Vlad to love the Ottoman Empire. They only needed him to depend on it. In 1448, Vlad claimed the throne of Wallachia for the first time. But it was not a glorious victory. It was a throne built on sinking sand. He had almost no strong army, no absolute loyalty from the nobles, no real foundation of power, and most importantly, the people of Wallachia were already used to changing rulers like changing clothes. To many of them, Vlad was simply another prince who would soon disappear. And they were right. Only a few months later, John Hunyadi launched another military campaign. Vlad was defeated. He was forced to flee Wallachia. This was the first time Vlad lost his throne, but it certainly would not be the last. What's interesting is this. At the time, many people believed Vlad's political life was over. He was too young, too weak, without enough allies, a failed prince with no chance of returning. But it was during the years of exile that Vlad truly became the man history remembers. He fled to Moldavia, the neighboring land to the east. There, Vlad lived under the protection of Prince Bogdan II and later Stephen, the man who would eventually become Stephen the Great. The years in Moldavia remain some of the least documented years of Vlad's life, but they may also have been the most important, because for the first time in his life, Vlad was forced to learn patience. He was no longer the rebellious hostage inside the Ottoman court, no longer the young ruler who had just lost his throne. Now he was an exile. A man who had to learn how to observe, listen, wait. Vlad began to understand how power truly worked. Strength was not always about having the largest army. Sometimes, real power came from knowing exactly when to strike. He built relationships, formed alliances, studied the weaknesses of his enemies, and most importantly, he fed his anger for years. Because Vlad never forgot what happened to his family. He never forgot the nobles who betrayed his father. Never forgot being turned into a hostage. Every year in exile only made him more dangerous. There is a famous saying, the most dangerous man is not the one who is angry, but the one who knows how to wait. And Vlad waited nearly 8 years, until the perfect opportunity arrived. Around 1456, the political situation in Europe began to change. The Ottoman Empire continued expanding its power. Hungary grew desperate for a leader strong enough to turn Wallachia into a shield against the Ottomans. And Vlad saw his chance. The irony was this. The man who helped Vlad return to the throne was John Hunyadi himself. The same man connected to the downfall of Vlad's family. But in medieval politics, hatred mattered less than advantage. Vlad understood that. And he was willing to work with his former enemy if it helped him reclaim power. This may have been the moment Vlad truly matured. Because from this point on, he no longer fought with emotion. He began to fight with cold calculation. And when Vlad returned to Wallachia for the second time, he was no longer the young prince he once had been. He returned as a man, sharpened by suffering into a weapon.
Did you notice something? The man who helped destroy Vlad's family eventually became the very person who helped him return to power. In Vlad's world, maybe there were no permanent friends or enemies, only interests. And do you think that mindset slowly transformed him into someone even more terrifying?
In 1456, Vlad Dracula returned to Wallachia for the second time, but this time, he was no longer the young prince who had once failed. He returned as a man completely transformed by war, betrayal, and exile. And from his very first days in power, Vlad understood one thing. If he wanted to survive, he had to make people fear him more than death itself. At the time, Wallachia was rotten from within. The boyar nobles had manipulated the throne for decades. Political factions constantly betrayed one another. Banditry and violence spread across the land. Some regions barely recognized royal authority anymore. And to the south, the Ottoman Empire continued growing stronger. After the fall of Constantinople, in 1453, all of Europe was gripped by fear. Everyone understood that the Ottomans would keep advancing. And if Wallachia collapsed, the road into Europe would be wide open. Vlad saw this more clearly than anyone else. He knew he did not have enough soldiers to defeat the Ottoman Empire in direct war. He lacked economic power. He lacked unity within his own country. So, he chose another weapon, fear. Vlad did not simply want to punish his enemies. He wanted to create such terrifying fear that no one would ever dare betray him again. And his first major act shocked all of Wallachia. During the Easter celebration, Vlad invited large numbers of boyar nobles to a grand feast. At first, the atmosphere seemed peaceful. Wine filled the tables, music echoed through the hall. The nobles believed the young ruler wanted to begin a stable reign. Then Vlad stood up. He looked at every man in the room and asked one simple question. How many princes have you replaced in your lifetime? Some answered 7, others answered 10. Some even admitted to more than 20. But they did not realize. Every number they spoke became a death sentence. Vlad listened silently, then he gave the order. The oldest nobles, those responsible for betraying the most rulers, were dragged outside and impaled immediately. Blood covered the grounds of the feast. The younger nobles were forced into brutal labor, building Poenari fortress. They dragged stones through the mountains, worked until collapse. Many died before the fortress was completed. This was not merely a purge. It was Vlad's declaration to all of Wallachia. The age of betrayal is over. And the terrifying part was this. It worked. Throughout Vlad's reign, almost no major noble uprising succeeded. Crime reportedly dropped dramatically. According to local legends, Vlad once placed a golden cup in the center of a public square. No guards, no protection, yet no one dared steal it. Not because they were honest, but because they knew exactly what would happen if they were caught. Vlad ruled through absolute fear, but he also believed that fear was saving his country. Then came the next group that earned Vlad's fury, the Saxon merchants of Transylvania. These merchants controlled much of the region's trade. They were wealthy, powerful, and according to Vlad, they were undermining his authority. Some even supported rivals who wanted to take the Wallachian throne. Vlad responded with terrifying violence. He attacked Saxon towns, burned villages, ordered mass executions, and most famously, he impaled countless victims. It was from this point that the name Vlad the Impaler began spreading across Europe. The surviving Saxon merchants wrote horrifying accounts about him, and thanks to Gutenberg's recently invented printing press, those stories spread faster than ever before. Images of Vlad dining among forests of corpses began appearing everywhere. The Germans called him a monster. The Ottomans viewed him as a devil. Even many Wallachians feared their own ruler. But what made Vlad truly different was not only his cruelty, it was the way he transformed terror into a strategy of power. He wanted both allies and enemies to believe there was no limit he would not cross.
Maybe the most frightening thing about Vlad wasn't the impalements themselves, but the fact that he fully understood the power of fear and used it like a weapon. And in your opinion, can someone who uses terror to maintain order still be considered a hero?
In 1462, Sultan Mehmed II marched into Wallachia to destroy Vlad once and for all. But as the Ottoman army advanced deeper into the land, they encountered something horrifying. Thousands of bodies impaled on wooden stakes, stretching for miles. A forest made of death. The stench of rotting corpses filled the air. Some victims were still alive, dying slowly on the stakes. According to historical records, even Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, was horrified. He ordered his army to retreat, not because he lacked soldiers, but because he realized the man responsible for this no longer thought like an ordinary human being.
Think about this for a second. Even Mem II, the man who conquered Constantinople, turned back after seeing that scene. So was Vlad a military genius, or had he crossed the line of humanity itself?
Vlad's life felt like a curse. He was overthrown again and again. He disappeared, and somehow, he always returned. After the war against the Ottomans, his own brother Radu sided with the Ottoman Empire and took control of Wallachia. Vlad fled to Hungary, seeking help, but instead of being welcomed as a hero, he was imprisoned for nearly 20 years, and strangely enough, some accounts claim that even in prison, Vlad continued impaling small animals. No one knows whether these stories were true or simply enemy propaganda. But by then, the legend had already spread across Europe. People no longer saw Vlad as a man. They saw him as something that could not die.
A man betrayed, stripped of his throne, locked away for nearly 20 years. Yet the moment he was freed, he returned to war again. Do you think that was incredible determination, or an obsession he could never escape?
In 1476, Vlad Dracula died. At least, that's what history believes. But here's the problem. No one truly knows how he died, and no one ever found his complete body. People believe Vlad was buried at Snagov Monastery, but when archaeologists opened the grave, it was empty. No body, no artifacts, no proof, only emptiness. And that emptiness was enough to create a legend. In Eastern European folklore, there exists a creature called the Strigoi, the dead who refuse to stay dead, creatures that return to drink the blood of the living. Now look at Vlad, a man overthrown multiple times, who always returned. A ruler whose body vanished without a trace. A figure feared across Europe. To the people of that era, he was no longer human. He was cursed. In 1897, Bram Stoker published the novel Dracula. He borrowed the name Dracula from history and transformed it into the most famous vampire in the world. And from that moment on, Vlad Dracula became immortal. Vlad Dracula did not drink blood literally. He fed on fear. He understood that in a world built on betrayal and war, being feared could be far more powerful than being loved. Even today, people still debate the same question: was Vlad a monster, or was he simply the only ruler ruthless enough to save his country?